A young African mother, carrying her sleeping child through a busy U.S. airport, never imagined the nightmare unfolding around her. When a K9 suddenly alerts on her daughter, security races to uncover a terrifying truth. The child has been drugged, and this mother may have been unknowingly used to traffic human lives. What happens next will shake the entire airport to its core. If stories like this captivate you, subscribe to our channel and hit like. Your support helps us share more real-world tales. And tell us, where are you watching from today? The hum of air vents and rolling suitcases blended into the steady rhythm of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. It was one of those late spring mornings when sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting long beams across the polished terminal floor. Travelers moved with practiced urgency, families wrangling toddlers, business people checking their watches, couples hand in hand. Among them, a woman moved differently. She was not in a rush. Her steps were slow, deliberate. On her back, secured by a well-worn sling, was a small child, her tiny arms limp around her mother's shoulders, her head resting motionless against a faded headscarf. The woman's name was Amina Diarra, 32 years old, from Bamako, Mali. She wore a flowing dress of deep indigo cotton and a cream shawl, both simple and functional. Her skin was dark and smooth, her eyes weary but watchful. The child on her back, her daughter Mariama, 3 years old, had not stirred since their layover in Istanbul nearly 10 hours prior. Amelia had chalked it up to exhaustion. It had been a long journey. Their final destination was Houston, where an NGO had arranged temporary housing. Amina was nervous. This was her first time in the U.S. alone, with a toddler. But relief mingled with the fatigue in her bones. They had made it this far. She adjusted the strap across her chest and stepped toward the final security checkpoint. Officer Thomas Greer stood near the screening area, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He'd been with TSA for 8 years and had seen his share of the unexpected. But the morning had been uneventful, until now. His partner Bruno, a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois, trained in narcotics detection, had stiffened the moment Amina entered the queue. Bruno's ears pricked forward. His tail, which moments ago had wagged lazily, now stood rigid. His handler, Agent Dana Morris, caught the change immediately. "Bruno," she called quietly. The dog's body tensed, gaze locked on Amina and the child she carried. His nose twitched rapidly, sampling the air. "Hold," Dana commanded, but Bruno surged forward, pulling slightly at the leash as Amina approached. Officer Greer intercepted her gently. "Ma'am, one moment please," he said, his tone professional but firm. Amina stopped, her heart skipping. "Can you say his name was Welcome?" she asked in halting English. "Routine check," Greer replied. Dana knelt beside Bruno, observing. The dog was exhibiting clear, alert behavior, directed not at Amina's bag or clothing but at the child on her back. Bruno let out a low whine, nose darting near Mariama's small form. Dana frowned. "He's not giving a standard narcotics alert," she murmured to Greer. "But he's keyed in on the kid." Greer's brow furrowed. "We should check," he said quietly. Turning back to Amina, he softened his tone. "Ma'am, can we ask you to step aside for a moment? We need to take a closer look." Confused and increasingly anxious, Amina nodded and followed as they guided her to a nearby screening area, partitioned off from the main flow of passengers. Inside, another officer joined them, along with a female TSA agent fluent in French. Through halting exchanges, Amina explained her journey, her background, and the NGO awaiting them in Houston. Meanwhile, Dana inspected Amina's belongings. No contraband, no suspicious materials. But Bruno remained fixated on Mariama, circling, sniffing with sharp intensity. "Has your daughter been ill?" Dana asked gently. "Any medication?" No, Amina replied, shaking her head. She was tired, sleeping since Istanbul, long flight. She glanced at Mariama's limp form, a flicker of concern. "Something's not right," she whispered. "Bruno's not wrong, but it's not drugs, it's something else." Greer nodded. "We need medical. Now." Over the next tense minutes, an airport paramedic arrived. With Amina's tearful consent, they carefully unstrapped Mariama from her mother's back and laid her on a portable cot. The child was pale, unresponsive. Her pulse was slow but steady. The paramedic checked her pupils, then sniffed her breath, his expression tightening. "She's under something," he muttered. "Heavy sedation, maybe." Amina's eyes widened in horror. "No, I did not. I would never." Dana placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We believe you," she said, "but we need to find out what's going on." Bruno sat nearby, watching Mariama with quiet vigilance. His initial alert had likely saved the child. As the paramedic prepared to transport Mariama to the nearest hospital, Amina broke down in silent sobs. Dana crouched beside her. "Stay with us, ma'am. We're going to figure this out." Across the checkpoint, the usual airport rhythm resumed, oblivious to the life-worth drama unfolding behind the partition. But for Amina and her daughter, the journey had just taken a terrifying turn, and the questions had only begun. Agent Dana Morris paced a tight circle near the partitioned security room, her fingers lightly gripping Bruno's leash. The Belgian Malinois remained seated, ears pricked forward, body tense as his gaze stayed locked on the small form of Mariama, now lying on a portable cot under the watchful eyes of two paramedics. The hum of the oxygen monitor added a steady beat to the rising tension in the room. Officer Thomas Greer, standing near the door, exchanged a glance with Dana. "He's not letting up," he said under his breath. "I've never seen him behave like this over a kid." Dana nodded grimly. "Neither have I." Bruno's body language was unmistakable. This wasn't the classic alert for narcotics, explosives, or chemical agents he was trained to detect. It was something deeper, more primal. Dana's supervisor, Chief Handler Marcus Levin, arrived moments later, summoned when Dana had called in for secondary evaluation. A grizzled veteran of 20 years in K9 operations, Marcus took one look at Bruno's stance and furrowed his brow. "Show me," he said quietly. Dana gestured toward the cot. Bruno immediately rose, nose twitching rapidly, and circled Mariama once more before sitting down and issuing a low, insistent whine. "That's not an alert for drugs," Marcus said, his voice low and certain. "This is a distress response. He's picking up metabolic changes, maybe chemical markers in her sweat or breath. Signs of toxicity." Amina, sitting nearby with her face buried in her hands, looked up sharply as the translator relayed the words. "Toxic? No, I would never hurt her," she cried, voice hoarse with panic. Dana knelt beside her. "We believe you," she said softly, but her gaze flicked toward the paramedics, now consulting quietly over Mariama's vitals. One of them, a lanky man with sharp eyes named Brad Whitmore, approached the officers. "She's stable, but just barely," he reported. "Her heart rate's low, pupils unreactive. We've run through the usual causes. There's no trauma, no fever, but the signs point to heavy sedation. I'd wager she's been given a high dose of benzodiazepines or a similar sedative. If we don't intervene fast, it could depress her breathing." Greer's stomach turned. "Jesus," he muttered. Dana's jaw tightened. "How soon can you move her to the hospital?" Brad glanced at his partner. "We've called for a transport. Should be here in 5. Across the room, Marcus stood watching Bruno with narrowed eyes. "I'm pulling up his advanced training logs," he murmured, thumbing through a tablet. "Remember, Bruno's had trauma detection overlays. He's been trained to alert on human chemical distress signatures too. Not standard for most K9’s. If he's reading this right, that girl's system is in deep trouble." Dana absorbed the words quickly. Bruno's unique training had included time with a medical detection unit that specialized in identifying hormonal spikes and stress metabolites, often used in missing persons cases involving hypothermia or overdose. His behavior now suggested a high public emergency. Meanwhile, Amina wrung her hands, her voice shaking as she explained again through the translator. "She slept whole flight, would not wake. I thought, just tired. The man in Istanbul, he sat next to us for a time. He gave her a toy, a small stuffed lion. Who knows who you are?" Dana's ears perked. "Where's the toy?" Amina fumbled through her carry-on, producing the small plush lion. Dana took it with gloved hands, examining it carefully. "Marcus, get forensics on this," she ordered. "Right away," Marcus replied, already making the call. Dana's mind raced. If the toy had been tampered with, laced with a sedative, or used to deliver the drug through dermal or oral contact, it could explain Mariama's condition. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was deeply unsettling. Across the room, Bruno whined again, shifting restlessly beside Mariama's cot. His distrust mirrored the urgency pressing in on Dana's chest. This wasn't just a fluke or random illness. Someone had deliberately sedated a child mid-transit. But why? And who? Dana turned to Greer. We need to pull the CCTV from the Istanbul layover. Full footage of their gate and seating area. I want every second of it. On it, Greer replied, already lifting his radio. As the team sprang into motion, the paramedics prepared Mariama for transport, attaching a portable oxygen unit and monitoring lines. Dana watched as they worked, heart heavy. The image of the limp little girl burned in her mind, as did the haunting determination in Bruno's unwavering gaze. Across the terminal, life went on. Boarding calls, overhead announcements, travelers rushing to gates. But in this small room, a darker truth had surfaced, and its shadow was spreading fast. The paramedics wheeled Mariama swiftly out of the partitioned security room, flanked by 2 officers. Amina followed close behind, clutching her bag with trembling fingers, her face stricken with fear and confusion. Bruno padded alongside Agent Dana Morris's, ears still alert, as if unwilling to leave the little girl's side. Diana glanced once at the departing stretcher, then turned back to Officer Thomas Greer. You need her full travel itinerary, she said quietly. Greer nodded and pulled up the manifest on his tablet. Flight originated in Bamako, layover in Istanbul for 6 hours before arriving here. He read, That's our window. Dana exhaled slowly. And Amina? Greer replied. Interview confirms what she told us, first time flying internationally. Single parent, NGO sponsorship verified. She's got no criminal record, no history of substance use. Dana rubbed the back of her neck. Then she's likely clean. But that means someone else targeted the kid. Bruno emitted a low whine, drawing Dana's gaze. She knelt beside him, placing a steady hand on his head. Good boy, she murmured. You just saved her life. Chief Handler Marcus Levin entered with a USB drive in hand. Forensics is rushing analysis on the stuffed lion, he said. But get this. I requested preliminary footage from the Istanbul layover. He handed the drive to Greer. Let's have a look. Moments later, in a nearby TSA operations room, the footage played on a large monitor. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. local time, a dimly lit gate lounge sparsely populated with weary travelers. In the frame, Amina sat slumped in a chair, her head resting against the seat back, exhaustion plain on her face. Mariama, still strapped to her in the sling, stirred fitfully. Then, entering from the right side of the frame, a tall man in a dark jacket and cap approached. He carried no visible luggage, moved with practiced casualness. The man watched intently as the man hovered near Amina for several minutes. At one point, he leaned down, appearing to adjust the strap of the sling. Mariama's head tilted back slightly, her mouth parting. The man's hand hovered near her face, then withdrew. He straightened, looked around, and casually walked away. Dana's fists clenched. Horse's suspect, she said. Greer rewound the footage, studying the man's features. Facial recognition? Marcus asked. Already running it, Greer replied. Amina, seated nearby in the operations room with a translator, watched the footage with wide, horrified eyes. I do not know this man, she said in a strained voice. I only remember being so tired. She was sleeping already. The translator relayed her. Dana knelt beside her. We believe you, Amina, she said gently, but someone used that moment to harm your daughter. We need your help to identify him. Tears streamed down Amina's cheeks. Please, save my baby, she whispered. Marcus paced behind them, voice low. Why target this woman? Why sedate her child mid-journey? Dana's mind raced. Possibilities, trafficking attempt, abduction cover, smuggling, she said. Mariama never left Amina's side, unless the goal was to use her body as a courier. Greer's face darkened. Jesus, we've seen that tactic before. Sedate the child, implant contraband, then extract at destination. Dana nodded grimly. That's why Bruno reacted. He smelled the chemical signature. Amina sobbed softly. No, I did not know. Dana placed a hand on her shoulder. You didn't. But we need to stop whoever did this. Moments later, Greer's tablet pinged. Partial match on the suspect, he announced. Interpol watch list, name unknown but linked to multiple trafficking investigations across Europe and Africa. Dana stood sharp. We need to lock down every contact point from that layover. Get Istanbul authorities involved. Greer was already typing, on it. Meanwhile, Bruno shifted restlessly, eyes flicking toward the door. Dana rose and stroked his head. We're close, she whispered. Stay sharp. Across the room, the looping footage continued to play. The dark figure leaning in, the tiny moment of violation that had set this entire chain in motion. Dana's jaw tightened. They had a lead, but behind that lead lay a far deeper web, and Mariama's life still hung in the balance as Agent Dana Morris's fingers drummed restlessly against the conference table as she reviewed the preliminary incident report. The air in the TSA operations room buzzed with tension, each officer acutely aware that this was no routine case. On the screen before them, the grainy footage from Istanbul looped once more, the unknown man leaning over Mariama, his movements subtle yet deliberate. Officer Thomas Greer entered briskly, tablet in hand. You ran the ticket purchase history, he began. Dana looked up sharply. And? Greer pulled up the data. It wasn't purchased by Amina directly. Her sponsorship through the NGO is legit, but the flight booking came through an online travel agency based in Morocco. The payment was routed through a third-party service that anonymizes transaction origins. Dana's eyes narrowed. Someone inserted themselves into the process. Greer nodded grimly. Exactly. The NGO forwarded funds to a logistics coordinator they've used before. Turns out that person's email account was compromised 3 weeks ago. Whoever did this booked her flights through a front. Dana leaned back, exhaling slowly. They engineered her route, forced the long layover in Istanbul. Chief Handler Marcus Levin crossed his arms. Perfect opportunity for contact and manipulation. The implications were chilling. Amina, desperate to escape hardship and start anew, had unknowingly been funneled through a path designed to exploit her vulnerability. Now her daughter was fighting for life and their enemy remained invisible. Just then, Dana's phone buzzed. A priority call from the hospital. She answered immediately. Morris. On the other end, Dr. Elena Patel, head of the toxicology unit, spoke with controlled urgency. Agent Morris, we've completed the first round of analysis on Mariama's blood work. Dana straightened. What did you find? Patel's tone darkened. This wasn't a standard sedative. We detected high levels of a compound structurally related to carfentanil, but modified. It's engineered for prolonged sedation with minimal outward signs. Dana's pulse quickened. There's not a pharmaceutical-grade sedative. Correct, Patel confirmed. This variant is not used medically. We've seen similar compounds in cases involving human trafficking, designed to keep victims docile during transport. Dana's stomach clenched. Any chance of permanent damage? Patel hesitated. It's too early to say. We've stabilized her vitals and begun counteractive treatment. She's responding, but we're not out of danger. Dana thanked her and ended the call. For a moment, the room fell silent as the weight of the revelations settled over them. Marcus spoke first. That settles it. This was an attempted trafficking operation. Greer's jaw tightened, and they used that poor kid as the mule. Dana turned to Amina, who sat nearby with tear-streaked cheeks, clutching a damp tissue. The translator conveyed the findings gently. Amina's face crumpled in horror. No, they used my baby, she whispered. Dana moved to her side. You couldn't have known, she said firmly. You targeted you. They set this up from the start. Amina sobbed quietly. I wanted only a new life for her, not this. Dana's resolve hardened. We're going to catch them, she vowed. But we need every detail. Who contacted you, who arranged the tickets, everything. Amina nodded through her tears, her voice hoarse. You need to coordinate with Homeland Security and Interpol. If they're using this chemical, it's part of an active trafficking pipeline. Dana agreed. Get on it, and pull every record we can from that travel agency and payment service. Greer was already typing. On it. As the team mobilized, Dana watched Amina with a growing sense of urgency. The pieces were coming together, but each answer only raised deeper questions. Someone had built this trap with precision. The man in the footage was just one link in a larger chain, and Mariama's blood carried the proof that this operation was far more sophisticated and dangerous than any of them had anticipated. Now they had to follow the trail before it vanished. Amina sat hunched in the cold metal chair, her arms wrapped tightly around her torso as if trying to contain the wave of nausea rising within her. The translator's words still echoed in her mind. Compounds used in human trafficking, engineered sedation, engineered route, compromised booking. Each fragment hammered at her defenses, unraveling the fragile hope she had clung to through the grueling weeks of preparation for this journey. She had sold nearly everything back home to finance the trip, believing the sponsorship was her salvation. Now she faced the harrowing possibility that she had been nothing more than a pawn in a far more sinister game. Agent Dana Morris watched her carefully, weighing the woman's reactions. Amina's shock appeared genuine. No signs of evasion or guilt, just raw devastation. Dana leaned forward. "Amina," she said gently, "we know you didn't intend for any of this, but understanding how they set this up could help us stop them." The translator relayed her words softly. Amina's lips trembled as she answered. I thought they were helping us," she whispered. "An NGO worker contacted me after I applied for assistance. He said he would arrange the flights and visas. He sent documents and instructions. Everything seemed real." Dana's jaw tightened. "Do you remember his name?" Amina nodded weakly. "He called himself Karim. He emailed and sometimes spoke on the phone. I never saw him in person." Dana exchanged a look with Chief Handler Marcus Levine. Another ghost, a name that would likely lead to a dead end or a false identity. Still, it was a starting point. Meanwhile, Officer Thomas Greer returned from the operations room, his expression grim. "We've got another problem," he said quietly to Dana. "Our surveillance team flagged suspicious activity in the concourse near the main security checkpoint." Dana's brow furrowed. "Define suspicious." Greer handed her a tablet, pulling up a live camera feed. The image showed a cluster of 3 individuals, 2 men and 1 woman, seated separately but maintaining visual contact with the security office entrance. One man wore a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, his posture deceptively casual. The second man held a newspaper but peeked over the top frequently. The woman appeared to be on her phone but kept glancing toward the hallway where Amina had been escorted earlier. "We ran facial recognition on the guy in the cap," Greer continued. "Low confidence match, but enough to raise alarms. Suspected associate of a West African trafficking ring, flagged by Interpol 6 months ago. The others are likely part of his crew." Dana's pulse. Marcus nodded grimly. "Makes sense. If she was the courier, intentionally or not, they'd want to ensure the package arrived." Dana's mind raced. Mariama had been hospitalized, the sedative identified, but whoever orchestrated this had no way of knowing yet whether their plan had succeeded or whether Amina remained a viable pawn. And if the traffickers suspected that the operation had been compromised, they might resort to desperate measures. Dana rose, issuing rapid orders. "Get plainclothes agents in position. I want that group monitored but not spooked yet. If we move too soon, we'll lose the thread." Greer nodded and relayed the instructions. Meanwhile, Amina sat frozen in her chair, her knuckles white against the thin fabric of her dress. The translator's voice wavered as she conveyed the latest development, that men connected to the trafficking ring were now inside the airport, watching and waiting. Amina gasped, a strangled sound escaping her throat. "They are here," she whispered, horror dawning in her eyes. Dana crouched beside her. "You're safe right now," she said firmly. "We will not let them reach you, but we need to act fast to shut this down." Amina buried her face in her hands, sobs racking her frame. "I did not know, my baby, my poor baby." Her voice cracked into unintelligible fragments. The translator gently placed a hand on her shoulder, offering comfort. Marcus approached Dana quietly. "We should consider extracting her off-site," he murmured. "Leaving her here makes her a target." Dana shook her head. "But yet, if we move her too soon, we tip them off. I want eyes on them first. See who else shows up, who they report to. This might be our only shot to map part of this network." Marcus hesitated but nodded. "You'll prep a team to move her when you give the word." Across the operations room, Bruno stirred restlessly beside his handler, his gaze flicking toward the door as if sensing the rising tension. Dana glanced at the monitor once more. The 3 figures remained in place, but the man in the cap had now pulled out his phone, tapping rapidly. "They're communicating," Greer observed. "Could be." Dana's gut twisted. "Then they'll know soon enough something went wrong," she said. "We need to stay ahead of them." Outside the sealed operations room, the bustling airport continued its rhythm unaware, an endless tide of travelers weaving through corridors and terminals. But within this small pocket of controlled chaos, the stakes had escalated sharply. Mina's shattered trust, the trafficker's tightening noose, the fragile thread of Mariama's life in the balance, all converged in a fragile moment that could tip into disaster at any second. Agent Dana Morris stood with her arms crossed, gaze fixed on the live feed as the three suspects remained in their scattered positions near the concourse. Every instinct screamed that time was running out. The traffickers were communicating, probably realizing by now that their operation had hit a snag. Meanwhile, Amina sat pale and trembling in the operations room, her eyes darting toward the door with each passing second. "Kit's on her scopes?" Chief Handler Marcus Levin said quietly beside Dana. "We need to move her soon." Dana nodded. "We're deploying a covert escort team now. We'll blend her into regular foot traffic, 2 agents posing as travelers, another shadowing in plain clothes. If they make a move, we'll have them." Officer Thomas Greer added, "I've coordinated with airport police. They're ready to assist on your signal." Minutes later, 2 plainclothes officers entered the room. One, Agent Sam Keller, handed Amina a fresh jacket and baseball cap. "Wear these," he said gently. "You're going to take you somewhere safe. Just follow our lead." Amina nodded shakily, clutching her small bag. Her belongings had already been scanned for additional tampering, but no further traces of the sedative compound had been found. However, the traffickers' continued presence suggested they still believed she carried something valuable, or remained a useful pawn. As the team prepared to move, Bruno paced restlessly, his sharp gaze flicked toward Amina's bag several times, more insistent with each pass. Dana noticed and frowned. Marcus checked Bruno's behavior. Marcus knelt beside the Malinois, observing closely. "He's not signaling drugs or stress," he murmured. "He's tracking something specific." Before Dana could respond, the lead agent signaled readiness. "We're moving," Sam said closely. By the 2 escorts, Dana and Marcus monitored the surveillance feed from the ops room. As Amina's group emerged into the bustling terminal, the dynamic shifted instantly. The man in the cap rose from his seat, adjusting his jacket and falling into a loose parallel path. The woman and the second man followed seconds later, weaving through the crowd with practiced ease. "They're on her," Greer said tightly. "Signal the shadow team to close in," Dana ordered. Outside, the airport's usual hum of voices and rolling suitcases continued unabated. Most travelers remained oblivious to the cat-and-mouse game unfolding in their midst. The agents guided Amina toward an elevator bank near the central atrium, hoping to divert through a restricted access corridor. The traffickers adjusted accordingly, tightening their formation. Bruno's agitation increased sharply. He pulled against his handler's leash, nose locked on Amina's bag. "Something's wrong," Marcus said urgently. "He's tracking a device, signal or metal." Dana's eyes widened. "Get him to her," Pingcom head sucked. "Perhaps there's a signal or method to understandable. He is." At that exact moment, the man in the cap broke formation, moving in rapidly from Amina's left. An undercover officer spotted the shift and moved to intersect him, but the trafficker's intent was clear. He aimed to make direct contact. Chaos erupted as passengers recoiled from the sudden flurry of movement. Bruno reached Amina's side in an instant, teeth bared, issuing a guttural warning growl. The man lunged, one hand reaching toward Amina's shoulder strap. With a sharp command from Marcus, Bruno launched his powerful frame, slamming into the assailant's torso. The man staggered backward, crashing into a bank of luggage carts. Agents swarmed instantly, pinning him to the ground as Bruno stood guard, eyes blazing. Amina cried out in shock, clinging to her bag. Dana's voice crackled over the comms. "Secure the area, sweep her belongings now." A tech agent arrived seconds later with a portable scanner. As Bruno continued to growl low and steady, the agent swept the scanner over Amina's bag. The device emitted a sharp beep. "We've got something," the agent confirmed. He unzipped a side pocket and extracted a small black cylinder no larger than a lipstick tube. Active tracking beacon, transmitting on a short-range encrypted frequency. Dana's stomach sank. They knew exactly where she was the whole time. Back at the ops room, the remaining 2 traffickers on surveillance feeds began moving hastily toward an exit, phones in hand. "They're bugging out," Greer reported. We need to intercept now. Dana's jaw tightened. Go. I want them alive if possible. In the concourse, Amina stared in wide-eyed horror as agents restrained the attacker and examined the beacon. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She whispered. Sam placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. You're safe. Stay with us. Bruno stood poised beside her, tail high, gaze sweeping the crowd for further threats. The team regrouped quickly, forming a protective ring around Amina as they prepared to move her to a more secure location. But even as they began the tactical withdrawal, Dana knew the situation had escalated. The traffickers had embedded themselves deeper than anticipated, and the presence of the beacon suggested a broader, more sophisticated network still lurking just beyond their reach. Agent Dana Morris leaned over the evidence table in the temporary operations center hastily set up in one of the airport's secure conference rooms. The beacon retrieved from Amina's bag now sat in an evidence pouch, its power source disabled, but its presence had opened a far darker thread. On the large monitor to her left, surveillance teams tracked the last known movements of the two remaining traffickers who had fled once their comrade had been captured and the attack on Amina failed. Meanwhile, Chief Handler Marcus Levin reviewed Bruno's body cam footage and behavioral logs to ensure no further devices had been planted. Across the room, Officer Thomas Greer sifted through Amina's background data, running cross-references on her employment history, known contacts, and sponsorship records. The faint hum of conversations, rapid keystrokes, and radio chatter underscored the tense atmosphere. Then Greer's voice cut through the noise. Dana, I found something, he said, eyes fixed on his screen. Dana turned sharply. What is it? Greer pulled up a document. According to her NGO application, Amina previously worked as a field coordinator for an international charity, Global Children's Outreach. She handled logistics for refugee relief in Mali. Dana frowned. That's a legitimate organization. Mostly, Greer said grimly. But here's the kicker. Interpol flagged that charity 2 years ago after one of their regional hubs in Morocco was linked to human trafficking activity. Several staff members were implicated in forging travel documents and funneling vulnerable individuals through relief flights. Dana's heart sank. You're saying her connection to them wasn't accidental? No, Greer replied. She left the organization when the funding for her project ran out, but her personnel file was accessible to their admin staff. Someone inside that circle could have flagged her as a vulnerable target. Dana straightened, the implications crystallizing. They used her own history against her. Across the room, Amina sat quietly, flanked by plainclothes agents and still visibly shaken. When Dana approached to question her, the translator conveyed the discovery gently. Amina's eyes widened with disbelief. Global Children's Outreach, she whispered. I worked with them to help orphans. I never thought... Her voice broke. Dana crouched beside her. Someone inside that organization targeted you because they knew your story. They knew you were trying to leave to find a safer life for your daughter. They manipulated your trust. Amina shook her head slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. They said, Dana's gaze hardened. That man in Istanbul, the one who approached Mariama, he's part of that same web. Marcus entered with a fresh data report. We just got a positive ID on the suspect from the Istanbul footage, he said. Name's Ibrahim Kawisi, former logistics officer for Global Children's Outreach. He was fired after the Morocco investigation, but disappeared before the authorities could question him. Dana's stomach clenched. And now he's resurfaced, using his old contacts and knowledge of the NGO's vulnerable clients. Marcus nodded grimly. He had access to Amina's profile, her travel plans, her entire history with the organization. Dana turned to Greer. We need every scrap of intel on Kawisi's associates. If he's the handler, he's not working alone. Greer was already pulling up further record. Meanwhile, across the room, Bruno remained alert, sitting at attention beside Amina, as if sensing the storm swirling around her. Danae returned to her seat, heart pounding. The betrayal cut deep. Not only had Amina been manipulated by strangers, but by those who once claimed to serve the same humanitarian mission she had dedicated her life to. Now the team faced a more complex adversary, one with institutional knowledge, insider access, and a proven ability to weaponize trust. The pieces were falling into place, but each new revelation brought only more questions. and the race to unravel the full scope of the network had only just begun. Agent Dana Morris paced beside the conference table as the full scope of the trafficking network began to take shape. The revelation about Ibrahim Kawisi's involvement had shifted the investigation into high gear. Now, time was the enemy. Kawisi had gone dark after Istanbul, but his associates had already shown their willingness to act within the airport. Across the room, Chief Handler Marcus Levin knelt beside Bruno, checking his harness and issuing soft commands. The Belgian Malinois remained focused, his posture tight, eyes scanning the room as if anticipating the next threat. Officer Thomas Greer entered briskly with an update. Interpol just sent us Kawisi's last known aliases. He's likely using one of them to operate here, and we've got unconfirmed chatter suggesting more victims may be en route or already in transit. Damus' jaw tightened. You're saying they may have smuggled others on this flight path, or hidden them here, using the same methods, Greer said grimly. They're that bold. Dana exhaled slowly. All right. Full sweep of all luggage flagged under associated aliases. Use the beacon's frequency to look for similar signals, and deploy Bruno and the K9 unit through cargo handling and baggage claim. Quietly, Marcus nodded. We're already on it. Moments later, Bruno led the sweep team through a restricted luggage handling area deep beneath the terminal. His nose worked rapidly as he moved among rows of unclaimed and in-transit bags, the handlers keeping pace. Dana and Greer monitored the search from a secure control room, eyes flicking between surveillance feeds and data reports. Suddenly, Bruno froze, body tensed, his ears pinned back. He let out a low, urgent growl, fixating on a large duffel bag near the end of a conveyor belt. Marcus issued the command, alert. Bruno barked sharply, stance rigid. A tech scanned the bag, another active tracking beacon, same make as the one found in Amina's belongings. The team unzipped the duffel carefully. Inside, beneath layers of clothing, they found a young boy, no older than 4, unconscious but breathing shallowly. His pulse was weak, pupils sluggish. The team acted instantly, calling for a medical team and initiating emergency response. But Bruno wasn't finished. Moments after the boy was secured, the Malinois pulled against his leash, dragging his handler toward a second bag, a hard-shell suitcase tucked beneath a cargo pallet. His behavior grew frantic, paws scraping at the bag. Marcus moved quickly, signaling the handlers. We've got another. The suitcase was pried open. The entrance, this time swaddled in thin blankets, lay a second child, a girl, perhaps 5, similarly sedated. Her tiny frame on the air in the control room grew heavy as the reports came in. Dana's knuckles whitened around the edge of the console. Jesus, Greer muttered. They were moving them through standard cargo. They planned for them to be picked up and transferred before anyone noticed, Dana said tightly. If Bruno hadn't caught them, her voice trailed off, the unspoken horror hanging in the air. Meanwhile, Marcus radioed in. You need full medical extraction for both victims, and I want every single bag flagged under this manifest checked now. The airport police mobilized swiftly, their presence discreet but effective. As agents worked to track Kawisi's fleeing associates, Bruno continued his methodical sweep, every movement watched closely by the K9 handlers and airport command. Back at the hospital, Mariama remained in critical care, but the latest update offered a flicker of hope. The sedative's counteragents were stabilizing her vitals. Her breathing had improved, though she remained unconscious. Dana received the news with cautious relief. She's fighting, she told Amina, who sat anxiously in a hospital waiting room under protective watch. Amina clasped Dana's hands tightly. Thank you, please save the others too. Her voice trembled but held fierce determination. No other mother should lose her child this way. Dana nodded, her resolve hardening. Outside, the operation intensified. The network had been exposed, but every step forward revealed deeper layers of deception and exploitation that demanded swift, decisive action. Agent Dana Morris reviewed the stream of fresh data flooding into the operations room. 2 sedated children recovered from cargo, Mariama stabilizing at the hospital, traffickers scattered but exposed. The case had cracked open, yet the deeper architecture of the network remained frustratingly elusive. Across the room, Officer Thomas Greer coordinated with airport police, expanding searches and interrogations. Meanwhile, Chief Handler Marcus Levin and Bruno remained in the field, methodically sweeping all flagged cargo and monitoring further alerts. A pattern was beginning to emerge. Many of the tagged bags had been cleared through customs with unusually minimal inspection. This level of clearance doesn't happen by accident, Greer said, scanning customs logs. Someone is greasing the wheels. Dana nodded grimly. We need to find out who. Simultaneously, an alert pinged across Greer's console. Hold on. I just cross-referenced the beacon serials against prior flagged shipments. We've got a hit. He pulled up the manifest records. Multiple suspicious shipments tied to an expedited clearance account. VIP lane approvals signed off by one name. Dana leaned in. Who? Greer brought up the personnel file. Elias Norwood, Assistant Director of Airport Operations. 20 years here, decorated for efficiency improvements. But look at this. He highlighted a string of authorizations. Several red-lagged shipments had bypassed standard K9 screening under Norwood's direct order. Dana's eyes narrowed. That's our inside man, Greer added. He's also the one who authorized Amina's NGO sponsor clearance, pushing it through expedited travel lanes. The implications hit hard. Norwood wasn't just facilitating logistics. He was actively embedding victims in the system, masking their movement beneath legitimate traffic. Dana's jaw clenched. We need him brought in. If he catches wind we're onto him, he'll disappear. Meanwhile, in the K9 staging area beneath the terminal, Marcus Levin finished briefing a fresh team of handlers. His sharp gaze landed briefly on Officer David Rourke, one of the senior handlers who had joined mid-actuation. Rourke adjusted Bruno's harness with practiced hands but wore a look of simmering intensity. Dana arrived moments later, bringing news of Norwood's suspected involvement. As the handlers absorbed the revelation, a visible shift rippled through the room. Rourke's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. Marcus noticed instantly. Dave? He asked quietly. Rourke swallowed hard. Norwood, he said hoarsely. 2 years ago, my daughter's case, missing from a relief flight. Same travel route, same NGO connection. We never found her. Customs log flashed an override by Norwood back then too. A charged silence followed. Marcus laid a steady hand on Rourke's shoulder. We're taking him down, he said firmly. Dana nodded. And I want every handler prepared. If there are more victims here, we're going to find them. Fueled by grim determination, the K9 teams mobilized. Meanwhile, Greer coordinated a discreet apprehension plan. Norwood, unaware his cover was unraveling, continued about his duties near the primary logistics hub. Surveillance teams tracked his movements with precision. At the designated moment, agents closed in. Norwood, sensing something amiss, attempted to retreat toward a restricted staff exit. Bruno, on point with Rourke, intercepted him in the narrow corridor. The Malinois emitted a sharp, commanding bark, halting Norwood mid-stride. Agents swarmed instantly, restraining him. As they secured Norwood, Dana arrived to oversee the arrest. Elias Norwood, she said coldly, you're under arrest for conspiracy to traffic minors, obstruction of justice, and abuse of official position. Norwood's face twisted with panic, sweat beading on his brow. You don't understand, he stammered. They forced me, save it for the court, Dana snapped. Rourke's gaze burned with restrained fury. You forced families to lose their children, he said, voice low. Norwood's eyes darted to the handlers, recognizing too late the resolve facing him. As agents led him away, Dana issued rapid instructions. Full forensic sweep of Norwood's office. I want every record, every communication he's touched. Across the terminal, K9 units continued their methodical search. Bruno at the forefront, tail high, nose sharp. The betrayal cut deep, but the resolve to expose every last layer of the network had only intensified. For Rourke, the operation had become deeply personal, and for Dana, the mission now carried the weight of every mother's desperate plea for justice. The days following Elias Norwood's arrest unfolded in a blur of coordinated action. With the disgraced airport official in custody, a cascade of new intelligence surfaced as forensic analysts pored over his seized records. Each recovered file painted a clearer picture of the trafficking network's reach. Covert financial transactions, falsified clearance documents, encrypted communications with known traffickers like Ibrahim Kawisi. But amid the dark revelations, glimmers of justice emerged. The 2 additional children rescued from the cargo hold regained consciousness under close medical care. Their identities were traced to missing persons reports in West Africa and Eastern Europe. International alerts were dispatched to locate their families, and preparations began for their eventual repatriation. At the heart of the investigation, Agent Dana Morris worked tirelessly, coordinating efforts between U.S. Homeland Security, Interpol, and airport law enforcement. The operation had expanded well beyond the confines of the terminal, but one constant remained: the testimony of Amina Dr. In a secure meeting room, Dana sat across from Amina, whose weary yet resolute gaze reflected the long journey she had endured. Mariama, now stabilized and recovering rapidly, rested in a nearby hospital room under protective watch. Through the translator, Dana spoke softly. "Amina, your testimony is critical. With your help, we can dismantle this entire network." Amina nodded firmly. "I will help. They must not do this to any other mother, to any other child." The urgency of her words resonated deeply with Dana. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security, recognizing Amina's bravery and the grave danger she faced in returning home, expedited a special humanitarian parole request. Within 72 hours, Amina and Mariama were granted emergency asylum. A new life awaited them, a life forged through unimaginable hardship but buoyed now by hope and justice. Meanwhile, news of Bruno's pivotal role in the operation spread rapidly through law enforcement channels. The Belgian Malinois, whose keen senses had led to the discovery of the sedated children and the unraveling of the trafficking ring, became an unlikely hero. In a ceremony held days later in a secured wing of the airport, Bruno was awarded the Department of Homeland Security Distinguished Service Medal, the first such honor granted to a K9 unit in over a decade. Agents, officers, and families of rescued victims attended the ceremony, their presence a testament to the operation's profound impact. Among them, seated in the front row, was Amina, with Mariama nestled in her lap. The little girl, though still pale, now smiled faintly, her small fingers clutching a soft replica of the stuffed lion that had once hidden such sinister intent. As the medal was placed upon Bruno's specially designed harness, a gentle murmur swept through the crowd. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment, but it was the quiet interaction that followed which left the deepest impression. After the ceremony, Marcus Levin guided Bruno toward Amina and Mariama. The child's eyes widened with recognition. Slowly she slid from her mother's lap and approached the Malinois with cautious steps. Bruno remained still, ears forward, tail swaying gently. Mariama reached out a tentative hand, brushing against his fur. The dog leaned in, nuzzling her palm with surprising tenderness. A gasp rippled through the onlookers as Maria giggled softly, the first true sound of joy she had made since her rescue. Amina covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Merci," she whispered. Dana watched the exchange, her heart swelling. In that small, unspoken moment, the healing had begun, not just for Mariama, but for everyone touched by the darkness they had fought to expose. Over the following weeks, Amina and Mariama settled into temporary housing, provided by a network of support organizations. Amina continued to work closely with federal investigators, her courage inspiring renewed momentum in the global fight against human trafficking. Meanwhile, Bruno returned to duty with renewed respect and admiration from his fellow handlers. For Officer David Rourke, the closure brought by Norwood's arrest offered bittersweet relief. Though his own daughter remained lost, the operation had spared other families from similar grief, and in that he found purpose anew. In the quiet moments that followed the storm, Dana often reflected on the unlikely alliances that had forged this victory. A mother's unwavering love, a child's fragile hope, a K9's instinctive loyalty, and a team's unyielding pursuit of justice. Together they had illuminated the shadows. Together they would continue to fight, and somewhere in the heart of a small girl now safe and free, a bond had been formed with a noble guardian, a bond that would endure long after the echoes of that harrowing day had faded. If this story moved you, consider subscribing to the channel. We share real-world stories that deserve to be told. And if you'd like to see more stories like this one, give this video a like to let us know. Now tell us in the comments which moment in this story struck you the most, and where in the world are you watching from today? We'd love to hear from you.